Hey, what's going on, Wellness Warriors? Diane Kazer here today. Gosh, I look like an angel. Oh wait, it's just the time of day. It's the bright sun coming in through through my blind. Anyway, I've got a really awesome show for you guys today. This one is for the ladies. I think most of them are going to be from now on. I am a lady, and I have lady parts, and I have lady problems. So, stemming from and blossoming from the whole concept of compassion and empathy, because I probably have been through every female problem that there is, except for birth. I have not yet had a child yet. However, I've gone through birth. I have come through my mom's womb. There are a lot of things that I have empathy on for ladies because I've been through so much. And so we're going to get straight to the heart of the matter today. Every woman today, pretty much, it seems, is struggling with energy. Every woman today is struggling with weight loss, or some people are actually struggling with just weight gain even. So I should just say maintaining optimal weight for you, although 2/3 of Americans are obese or overweight. And then the other ones are things like yeast infections and urinary tract infections and mood swings and lack of sex drive and sleep and acne and all sorts of other things. Autoimmune disease is so prevalent among women. 1 out of 10 women are said to have an autoimmune disease diagnosed, while it's even said that 5 out of 10 women are going undiagnosed with thyroid problems. And so we're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff today with hormones and things, but the topic that is the umbrella to all of these things, and a lot of people don't think it's a sexy topic, but it really has to be talked about. And getting straight to the heart of the matter instead of just putting band-aids on all of these issues and symptoms. All of a sudden you feel like you have a whole bunch of symptoms and a whole bunch of issues, and you just can't deal with taking all these pills or taking all these prescriptions or seeing different doctors for different things. Let's stop this nonsense, because there's one huge umbrella that, trust me, I've been through this for decades enough to be able to say now that there's this umbrella, and it was said by Hippocrates years ago that all disease begins in the gut. So today we're going to talk about all those topics and how they start here and how we can fix them. Cool. Okay, so I've got one of the most amazing guys that I know in this industry, Kiran Krishnan. I'm going to make sure I say all the things on his title, because he has got a lot of things that he's done over the last 17 years in this industry. But first and foremost, he's a microbiologist, he's a researcher, he's a product developer in the food and dietary supplement industry. So he's been in this longer than I have and is very passionate about this topic, is very clear-cut about it. And I think that he speaks more passionately about women's health when it comes to probiotics in the gut than most anybody that I've ever heard. So, Kiran, welcome to the show today. Thank you so much for being here with us, ladies.
Thank you, Diane. I love being here. I'm honored to be part of it.
And he's the world leader.
Oh, yeah, you can see that, huh?
Intentional plug, dude. Subliminal plug. Look, I'm the world leader. You must listen to me with respect to the gut. I really do. What?
It's been signed by a number of people, too.
Like,
I got it from one of the companies I'd worked with for a number of years. They gave it to me before I left.
Oh, so that was a gift.
It was a gift.
Cool.
Yeah.
And ladies, what you'll find today is that Kiran is a gift, because his knowledge is pretty profound. I do actually, I'm not going too far on a limb when I say that I think that you're like the living version of Hippocrates.
Thank you. It's funny. I use a lot of his quotes in a lot of the presentations I do, especially to doctors, because of course every doctor has taken the Hippocratic Oath, and many times they forget what the father of modern medicine has told them almost in 400 BC, so over 2,000 years ago. And especially one of the things that Hippocrates said was that death sits in the bowel and bad digestion is the root of all disease. And he said this in 400 BC. And finally, we're coming to understand that now, a couple thousand years later. So, better late than never, I guess.
Yeah, right. And then I was even blogging about this the other day too, Kiran, is that, and I know that just like the Bible, there's been several iterations and interpretations and progressions of what all this stuff meant from years ago. But I know that one of the other Hippocratic oaths is that first do no harm. Mm-hmm. And so I know one of the biggest issues that we're having today in the gut is the assault of all of the good guys that are in there. And one of the most simple, if you're thinking about this in a simple form, is that there should ideally be more good guys than bad guys in the colon. There's a really cool symbiotic relationship down there in this colon. And when there's such an overuse of antibiotics, that are doing more harm than good, then we really have to question, are we doing more good or more harm with the administration and progression and greater and stronger antibiotic use for just about anything today? That, you know, even some women are taking antibiotics just to make sure they don't get acne for their wedding. And so it's becoming quite overused. I know that you, Mr. Hippocrates, we will call you today. Without further ado, Karan's going to steal the show today because this is really, really important information, guys and ladies. Sorry. The colon and the bowel and bloating and obesity and excess fat in that area and where we carry the baby. I mean, so much happens right down here. This is the center force for life. And, you know, we call it chi in Chinese medicine. We call it prana and yoga. And so it's where breath starts, and it's where breath starts for our own life force, where breath starts for babies in our next generation. And so I think that this not only was going to help the women of now, but the women and the babies in the future as well, because we build our babies from the very beginning, from that 9 months on, and what we're eating and what we're putting into our body. And so, Karan, let's just, I guess, first start from the most simplistic form. We are going to get into pregnancy and birth and breastfeeding and, you know, all the things we've talked about already so far, you know, energy and weight and mood, the most important things today that women are complaining about. So in its most simplest form, what is a probiotic?
Yeah, so the term probiotic was developed in the 1960s. It literally means for life as opposed to antibiotic, which means against life. But a probiotic actually has a real specific scientific and functional definition. So the World Health Organization defines a probiotic as a live microorganism when given in adequate amounts confers a health benefit to the subject. So the first part of that is incredibly important. It's the first part being a live microorganism. A probiotic, in order for it to be a probiotic, has to be alive in the intestines in order to perform a function. And not only once it gets there, it has to be alive, but it has to be able to be alive in adequate amounts relative to the rest of the bacteria within the environment to perform a health benefit or of some sort in order to be understood as probiotic. And that's where we start to see that the word probiotic is probably one of the most misused words in the market today, both in supplements and in foods. You know, you walk through the aisles of the grocery store and you will see probiotic and everything these days. We're talking about cookies and coffee, of course, drinks. You know, I've even seen chocolates and candies and of course supplement aisles. There's probably 300 different products out there that are probiotics. The biggest problem with that is most of those products don't have organisms that are going to survive through the harsh gastric environment of the stomach and get to the intestines alive. And if they don't do that, they don't meet the definition of a probiotic. And so that's where we first look to delineate between what a true probiotic is and what I call dead bacteria therapy. You know, you're just taking in a whole bunch of random dead bacteria in most of these products, in things like yogurts and kombuchas and kefirs and things like that people believe to be good bacteria going and living. So that's the first step, is we have to understand a probiotic has to survive through the gastric system in order to be considered a probiotic. It has to get to the intestines alive. And most products on the market don't do that. You know, Diane, I challenge most people to think about this is if you go to the health food store, you ask a clerk what's a good probiotic, most of them will point you to the stuff in the refrigerator, right? They say the refrigerated stuff is the best probiotic. Well, the reason those are being kept in the refrigerator is because they don't survive at room temperature. You know, if you keep them on the shelf at room temperature, balmy 70 degrees, they end up dying in the bottle. Your gut, your stomach is 98 degrees and a pH of 1. There's a lot of hydrochloric acid in there. Those little guys in there can't survive at room temperature. There's no chance of surviving through the stomach. And so, you know, you're just wasting a lot of money and putting a lot of dead bacteria through the system. With those. So with the probiotic, the most important thing to look for first is something that actually survives through the gastric system and not artificially. That's another aspect of it. Now you'll get companies that will start adding technology to the product in order to help them survive. They'll intercoat it or they'll add time-release capsules and things like that. And that's kind of a pharmaceutical approach to it because you're taking something natural that doesn't perform a function and you're adding technology to try to make it do that. So nature didn't design these bacteria as probiotics, so they're trying to add all this technology to make it act as a probiotic to survive through the gastric system. So That's something people need to keep in mind. The first step, what a true probiotic is one that survives through the gastric system naturally.
So, yeah, it sounds like a genetically modified organism. How do we put something together artificially?
Right.
Like those movies that scare me with robots that take over the world, like AI, artificial intelligence. It's like, oh my god, the more non-natural, non-created by Mother Nature things that we take, the closer to being robotic I think we are. It kind of freaks me out.
Yeah.
So,
And here's another aspect of it that actually freaks me out as a microbiologist and someone that understands the microbiome. One of the most important aspects of the microbiome is the genome of the microbiome, right? So humans, we have about 25,000 genes in our chromosomes, right? And we think of ourselves as these really amazing high-order species. But think about a plant. A rice plant has 38,000 genes in its genome. So a rice plant has more genes than we do. And so the question is, how do we perform all the complex functions that we perform if we don't have the genes to do it? And the way we do it is by utilizing the genes that are housed within our microbiome that come from the 100 trillion organisms that live there. So we actually have 135 times more bacterial DNA in us than our own DNA. So we perform our functions by utilizing bacterial DNA. And in fact, there are over 1,000 unique proteins that are produced just by the bacteria in our gut using their DNA that we need for our life and existence that we can't produce ourselves.
it's so cool.
So the genome of the microbiome is so critical to our health and function. And so when we're taking in these random strains of bacteria every day from a lot of these different products that claim to be probiotics, they're dying in the stomach and they're releasing their DNA into our system. We're kind of polluting the DNA within our microbiome with all this artificial stuff that's coming in.
Yeah.
And that's a big problem. We're changing the DNA atmosphere within our gut that is so important to our health and wellness.
And to me, as a practitioner, the more that I hear that we're doing that sort of thing with artificial means, that means that we're becoming more and more dependent on artificial means to continue the progression of feeling better. Because if we go this direction too far over here with a lot of antibiotics or artificial things or birth control or chemicals or harmful chemicals and personal care products and things, and the more dependent we are, the stronger we have to pull those weapons over here to undo the mess that these have created, because this natural means isn't going to be enough anymore. It's like that's kind of the logic that I use. So now you said something, Tron, a little bit earlier. As a listener, I'm going, well, gosh, but I eat all this. I thought kefir and yogurt and things like that were good for me. So this yogurt says that it's got 100 billion colony-forming units of some kind of lacto-bifido something-o. That's not good for me?
It's interesting. So a lot of those products are fermented products. Fermented products do have some nutritional benefit to them. So when the bacteria is fermenting the dairy or the cabbage or whatever the fermented food is that you're making, during that fermentation product, the bacteria produces a lot of important nutrients. And those nutrients are housed within that food itself. And those nutrients, when taken in, have a lot of benefit for the body, for the gut in general. But the bacteria that's doing the fermentation has no capability of living through the digestion process and going and living within your intestines and performing probiotic functions. That's where it differs. So if you're drinking a kombucha or you're making it at home, for example, there are some important nutrients within the kombucha, but the bacteria within the kombucha have no chance of making it to your intestines and living. So I would call all fermented foods, including yogurts that hopefully don't have a lot of sugar, artificial flavor and all that, categorize all of them together as nutritional foods, but they're not probiotics by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, that's an important distinction, everybody, ladies especially. It's a very important distinction. And so, I've even heard some people say that today I would rather take a probiotic than a multivitamin. Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts on that, on ladies' health?
In fact, probiotics are really becoming the next multivitamin. Multivitamins have been the biggest portion of the dietary supplement category since the beginning. And most people take a multivitamin because they feel they're doing something good for themselves, they're doing something right. Most people don't feel anything from a multivitamin. It's just a peace of mind. I take my multivitamin every day. And unfortunately, most multivitamins don't have enough of any one nutrient to really be of any impact. But probiotics are a very important category of product to be taking every day, because every day we're trying to strike a balance within our gut. We're trying to strike a balance between the good and the bad bacteria. And every day we do a number of things to assault our gut and tip the balance towards the bad bacteria. So we need to do something from a nutritional standpoint to tip the balance back to the good bacteria. And so probiotics really are becoming the next multivitamin, because they are a very important daily supplement to continue to keep that fight in the balance of the good bacteria on a daily basis. And when we balance our good bacteria, the rest of our body pays in great wellness. We can't have great overall health without a healthy, balanced gut.
Yeah, so in my mind, I'm thinking, because I know ladies and I know women are like obsessed about going to the gym to make sure that they can try to keep as close to their figure goal as they like. So it's like taking a daily probiotic, and the right one, mind you, which we'll talk about soon, but the right kind is like taking your colon to the gym every day, right?
Absolutely.
Like taking your immune system to the gym every day.
Yep. We've all had antibiotic therapy. We've all taken things like antacids and, different OTC products that are all officially chemicals that aren't naturally existing in the environment. So all those things harm your gut flora. We all have, things that we eat that harm our gut flora. We're exposed to chemicals every day. Even the air we breathe, the water we drink with the fluoride in the water. So everything we do within our environment that we exist in assaults our gut every day. And so it's extremely important to take our gut to the gym and work it out and support the good bacteria every single day, so we never shift the balance too far where it becomes hard to come back.
Yeah, totally. Okay. I like that little comical visual. I think people will resonate with that one.
Mm-hmm.
So the next part of that, speaking of going to the gym, and the whole reason why, we're vain creatures, dude. Like, let's be honest. We want to be noticed. We want to be recognized. We want to be complimented. We want to be noticed, and we want approval. And so, especially for women, because I am one, I know that we're more sensitive about that sort of thing. We tend to be more insecure, and society is put a lot of emphasis on us looking pretty and beautiful and skinny. I can't stand that word, but thin, whatever. So weight loss and the inability to maintain our goal weight, Ron, it's an issue today more than ever, especially for women, because I know our hormonal imbalances make it more of an uphill battle than for men to maintain a healthy weight. So what does probiotics have anything to do with weight management?
That's a great question. So there's two very important parts. In fact, there's more than two, but the two things that we really should talk about that are important and practical for women to understand. Number one is everybody suffers from cravings, right? Some people say, oh, they have a sweet tooth, or some people have particular cravings, things that they really can't avoid eating. They think about, they see a picture of, or a memory, an emotion. Creates an association with food, and that's a very powerful association. And those cravings are the things that really derail our good eating habits and activities. What they're starting to find out now from the research over the last few years is a lot of those cravings are due to bacteria within your gut. So the bacteria within your gut that has been selected for are actually creating these cravings and making you eat those foods. And it's amazing to think that a few trillion little guys can control this huge, complex creature known as a human. But they're actually pulling the strings. They actually create neurotransmitters in the gut that they send through the vagus nerve system, goes directly to your brain. And when it goes to your brain, it makes you want to eat sugar, makes you want to go get that cupcake or that cake, whatever it may be. And they're doing it for their own benefit. So that indicates that you've got an imbalance of bacteria within your gut, and the type of bacteria that is running the show are the ones that are craving sugars or craving certain types of carbohydrates. And that's why carbohydrates, you can actually have addictions and cravings to them, it's not because you're weak-minded and all that. You've got bacteria in there that are running the show. They are controlling your behavior and your desires. And so they are sending you signals to your brain that makes you want to go and buy the cupcake. And that's something very important to understand, because how do you combat that, right? So most of us think about nutrition from a macro standpoint. We think about protein, fats, and carbohydrates and what proportion of each, and what are my daily caloric intakes, what am I burning. Those things are all good and important to understand how to get fit and how to lose weight and all that. But one of the things we don't pay attention is the micronutrient side of things. Even, most people will say you can have a cheat day, right? During a workout plan. The problem with the cheat day is it helps you with trying to stay on routine and things like that, because you get some relief. But the problem with that cheat day is you're actually feeding the bacteria that are trying to stay alive, because the ones that create sugar.
Staying alive, staying alive.
Exactly. They're waiting for that cheat day, because then when you put in those sugars and you eat that donut or that cupcake or that cookie that you consider to be, you know what, I worked out 5 days in a row, I burned a lot of calories, I ate really well, I deserve this cookie. That one cookie is going in, and although from a caloric standpoint, from a macronutrition standpoint, it's not doing anything to create weight in your body, but what it is doing is it's feeding the bacteria that are controlling your cravings, your desires, and your mood. And that's a very important factor. So you really have to be cognizant of what you're putting in, even in tiny amounts, because every little bit feeds those bacteria.
Yeah, that's so many key nuggets right there you just said. And one of them is that one of my least favorite quotes today is everything in moderation.
Right.
Because, I mean, it used to be, if you think about like 50 years, maybe 70 years plus ago, there weren't 85, 100,000 plus man-made chemicals that are literally altering our DNA and the chemical messengers from our gut to our brain.
Right.
And so back then, I think that it can apply, but now it's like people are even saying with sweets and stuff, it's like everything in moderation. And I say, I kind of cringe. I did a radio show about this a long time ago, back when I had Wellness Quality Radio. It's still accessible, so I'll put it below so you guys can hear it. But it kills me, because I think that the Warrior Cleanse that I've created, that's going to be launching by the end of April, I talk about in one of the modules that we as Americans are eating like 150 grams plus of sugar a day. And, more than half of that is high fructose corn syrup, which just goes straight to the fat cells. And, it blunts the insulin receptor sites. So sugar just, whenever you eat sugar, like the stuff we're talking about, just goes straight to your fat cells. And so people are going, I don't know why I can't lose weight, because these hormones are not communicating very well. But I try to get people down to like 50 grams or less. And of those 50 grams, I think that, and on my recipes, this recipe section of my site, and the recipe books that I suggest out to people, and my favorite things I'm sharing on my YouTube channel that works for me, because I've had sweet tooth cravings since I was a little kid too. I've fought this battle myself, and have had tons of yeast infections and tons of UTIs and tons of women problems, bloating, and just crazy depression and anxiety and back and forth and insomnia. I've had all of it. And I've taken all the most fun recipes that, like brownies, for instance, I'm doing a video of that today on how to make healthy brownies. And it's not full of sugar. I mean, if anything, there's like a half of a cup of coconut sugar in there, which is a lower glycemic index. It's still sugar in the body, but it's still lower. And so there's ways that you can have healthy treats, but it doesn't need to be the white, naked, stripped, nutritive stripped sugar. Sugar is sugar to the body, so the smaller amounts the better. But there's a healthier way of getting these treats in, when I have a treat now, it's a healthier version of that, store sold treat. So yes. Would those still be better offenders to the gut? I mean, like things like coconut sugar and stuff like that instead of this white sugar?
Absolutely. So, having the purified fructose or sucrose from corn and things like that are not natural to the gut, right? So our ancestors didn't eat refined sugar. And so for millions of years and through human evolution, our gut has evolved without the presence of those refined sugars. So now when we start putting in so much refined sugar into our gut, we're selecting for bacteria that prefer those refined sugars, and those are unnaturally overgrown now in the gut. That's why we're having all these issues. So if you use more natural sugars that humans have encountered for thousands of years, you're much better off. So cane sugar, for example, is still better than high fructose corn syrup based sugars. I like organic raw honey. Honey is a great way to sweeten things without having problematic sugars. In fact, honey comes with a lot of good antimicrobials in it, so the bacteria actually don't even like to digest honey. So that's why you can keep honey outside in the shelf without it spoiling for years, because honey is naturally antimicrobial. And so, that's not going to create the overgrowth of the bad bacteria. I also don't mind stevia and some of the other the stuff from beets, the xylitol. Those are okay as well. There's no data that shows that they actually feed the bad bacteria as well. They're not metabolized. The worst thing is the artificial sweeteners, the aspartame, the sucralose-based artificial sweeteners. Those things are even worse than sugar, because they can do two things that are very harmful. Number one, they do feed the bad bacteria that sugar does as well. So they do that anyway, and so they promote the growth of the fat craving and sugar craving bacteria within the gut. Then they also screw up your body's ability to metabolize normal glucose. So they can actually dramatically increase your risk of diabetes. So you're eating these sucralose and things like that. It's messing up the receptor sites for glucose within your cells. So your body doesn't even know what to do with sugar when it does encounter it. And so that is a real long-term risk with using those aspartame and I meet a lot of women that'll drink Diet Coke. They're happy to drink Diet Coke. In fact, a lot of people are addicted to it, which is a whole other thing. But you'll drink a Diet Coke instead of a Coke, but a Diet Coke is far worse than a Coke. And if you're going to drink one of them, you're better off drinking a Coke. Hopefully no sodas at all, but if you're going to do that, don't go with the one with the aspartame in it.
Yeah.
Stay away from the Splendas and those sweeteners. I mean, they're just they're not doing you any favors at all.
And they're hidden. Ladies hear this. Anything that says diet on it or zero sugar, of course, it's the chemical beep storm. And this is what Fran's referring to, and it's going to go against your weight loss goals or weight maintenance goals, and that's a big issue. I see it in, the bodybuilding world, Karan, and you're an athlete too, and I used to not pay attention to this stuff. I just wanted it to taste good and make my muscles bigger so I could look 10% body fat and get on stage and win a trophy. And, when I was a bodybuilder anyway. But I think I would even go out on a limb to say that like 95% of the weight loss products out there, or the bodybuilding supplements, and the gainers and the losers, are completely laced with artificial sweeteners. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, because they've got a number of ingredients in there that just don't taste good. And so the way they make things taste good is just by sweetening it. And then they know that they're not going to put regular sugar in there, because people trying to lose weight are very conscious of the carbohydrate content. And so you hide it using artificial sweeteners, and then another thing, and this I think most people know this is already, but maybe some don't, but anything with low fat in it is just some of the worst stuff you can eat. They've basically replaced fats with fast-burning carbohydrates that are high in glycemic index, that actually make you gain fat much more than fat does. So absolutely stay away from everything that is low fat.
Totally.
It's really the low fat phenomenon in the food industry has been pegged as the cause of the huge increase in obesity over the last 25 years. Period. Starting from the early 80s, because they basically replaced fat with sugar, and that is causing far more problems than fat ever did.
God, and it's like you start seeing all these issues with hormonal imbalances and Alzheimer's, and you make that connection. And infertility, it's like when it says low fat or non-fat, it basically means I'm signing up for hormone imbalance and mood issues and sleep deprivation and low sex drive and all the other things we're talking about today. So you need fat. I always say eat fat to burn fat. I do this in dance. Eat fat to burn fat. Eat fat to burn fat. It's like you need fat, and our skin is made up of cholesterol and fat and collagen, and those things are all necessary. So all the things that we need we're deprived in our diet. So, okay, I did want to say before we move on to the next topic that you mentioned earlier, you know, the breads, the sugars, the cookies, the sweets, the chocolate, the pastas. You know, those are all the things that a lot of people, they're like, oh, I have no willpower. I have no willpower. And it's like, I always like to say, let me kind of pull you off of this limb here for a second and say that you can have this willpower if you take the right kind of probiotics. So because these bacteria, like you talked about earlier, are the ones that are governing your food cravings. And of course, you've got some people who are just addicted because they are, you know, they might associate, like you said, a behavior from their childhood or a positive, like, oh, I used to have cake before, you know, Christmas bedtime or whatever. You know, that's a different story once in a while. But the people who are incessantly associating it with reducing stress, that this, I know you said that there's studies that have helped people get through those cravings. So it's less about willpower. Don't damn yourself so much, say it's all my fault, it's all my fault. It's all my bacteria's fault. So you could say that next time. It's like, my bacteria are talking, and then you're going to sound really cool at a dinner table. So I'm the nutritionist, one of the two nutritionists for a group called No Excuse Moms. And in this group, a lot of women are really upset that they can't control their cravings. And women in general, we're just that way. And so it's like the whole No Excuse campaign. We want women, period, to not have an excuse to need these things. And so the more that you can hook up your gut so that you have these less cravings, then at that point you can say there's no excuses when your gut microbiome is imbalanced and you don't have the food cravings anymore. At that point, you'll have great energy. Your body wants to start burning fat. It's going to become a fat-rubbing machine. You probably won't be getting these infections. You're going to have great sex. And I can say this from testimonials from myself and my other female clients I've been working with. And all the other issues that women deal with on a regular basis, like urinary tract infections and infertility. So let's talk more about the energy issue, Ron. So many people today, so many women today are saying that, of course, we're more hormonally sensitive, but I'm anxiety or depressed. I'm either one of those two, back and forth. I have no motivation or low motivation. And I feel like I could just sleep all day. I'm moody and I'm tired and I'm wired and tired. I'm just all over the place. So how can probiotics help that?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And actually, that ties back to the second point I was going to make about weight loss with probiotics, which I forgot to, which actually ties into the question you just asked, and also ties into the whole notion of cravings and satiety, right?
That's what it ties.
One of the very important functions of a real probiotic is they digest your food, the insoluble and soluble fibers, the ones that our small intestine can't digest for ourselves. They digest these foods in the colon, and they produce something called short-chain fatty acids. Short-chain fatty acids, the most well-known ones are acetate, propionate, and butyrate. What's important about these short-chain fatty acids is they are some of the things that control the satiety signals to your brain. So it's your gut telling your brain, hey, we've got enough food here, stop wanting stuff, stop going after things, stop putting more things in your mouth. And that's how you curb the cravings that people have, the things that people can't resist. And it's because they're signaling from the gut to the brain saying we have plenty of calories, we're getting plenty of food, stop craving things is messed up, and you're not getting enough production of short-chain fatty acids. So that's a very important aspect of weight loss, as well as the satiety and the cravings that you were just talking about. Then it comes to the energy question that you asked.
Oh, hold on. Before you go to the energy question, I just want to say something that I have yet to see a lab test that I've done on my lady clients where their short-chain fatty acids were not off the chart. Like they're not producing enough, and I have to give them, well, fiber feeds those things too, and we should be getting like 25 to 40 grams of fiber a day, ideally from cruciferous, green vegetables, and we're not. So we're fiber deficient. We're not pooping enough, and that's a big thing. That's a big part of my warrior cleanse too, to talk about getting enough fiber. So I wanted to make a mention of that because I see it's so prevalent, and I didn't really understand it until I started running these lab tests. I'm going, whoa, short-chain fatty acids. While it sounds like a nerdy thing to talk about, it's basically fiber feeding your good bugs. And like what Karan's saying.
Yep, and but in order for that to work, you have to have a sufficient amount of good bugs in your colon. Because if not, then you have bad bugs eating those fibers. What happens when the bad bugs eat the fibers? They produce toxins and they produce gas. And
you get bloated.
Ammonia. Yep. You get the bloating. You're farting in places you shouldn't be farting.
Constipation.
What's that?
Constipation.
Constipation. Yep. Exactly. You're not getting the proper fluid balance in the gut. And in fact, a lot of people end up having diarrhea and upset stomach because you're not the colonic cells aren't absorbing fluid well enough, so you're retaining too much fluid in the stool itself. So it screws the whole thing up. And so the fiber, both insoluble and soluble fibers, are incredibly important, but you need to have good bacteria there in order to feed the right good bacteria. So that's an important thing to consider. The short-chain fatty acids also play a big role in cellular energy metabolism, right? So, of course, we all know that energy comes from the cells. And the mitochondria of the cell is a powerhouse of the cell. The mitochondria produces something called ATP. ATP is basically the energy molecule that humans use to have energy, move the muscles around, move the brain, nerve function, everything that we do requires ATP. Now, ATP is determined by a few different things. Number one is what you're feeding the cell and how effectively the cell is metabolizing that through the glycolysis system and other biochemical systems that feed the mitochondria. The second part of it is how many mitochondria you have. And the amount of mitochondria you have within your body, especially within your muscle cells, is dictated by how much exercise you do. So the more exercise you do, the more mitochondria you have, the more energy your body produces, the more energetic you feel. And in fact, that's one of the benefits of training, especially resistance training and failure training. So when you take muscles to failure, what you're doing is you're triggering a biochemical signal that tells your muscle, hey, we didn't have enough energy to finish that set. We need to produce more mitochondria. And you actually produce more mitochondria in the cells.
Cool.
So that's an aspect of it, yeah. And then the other part of it is there's something called angiogenesis. I don't know if you're familiar with angiogenesis, but angiogenesis is actually the creating of veins and vessels to feed more blood to your muscles. So you actually get more nutrients and more energy compounds to those mitochondria so you can actually metabolize them faster. Angiogenesis also happens in response to strenuous exercise, intervals, strength training, those kind of things. So it's very important to do the exercise. The other part of it is the short-chain fatty acids control a lot of the DNA and RNA synthesis to actually stimulate this mitochondrial activity and how your body uses the energy that's coming in from food. And so if you don't have adequate good bacteria in your gut, and this is, even apparent for athletes, and why we have a lot of athletes using the right type of probiotic, is even though you're eating right, even though you're exercising, if you don't have enough short-chain fatty acids turning on those metabolic switches in your body, you're not going to be utilizing your food effectively to produce ATP. That's just a simple fact of it. There's another portion of it, and of course that is the digestion and assimilation of your food. Food comes in this macromolecular state. You start breaking down some of the food in your saliva itself. You've got salivary amylase, which is an enzyme that actually starts to break down some of the carbohydrates. Then, of course, the chewing motion is very important as well. Most people don't chew their food enough. That's another thing to keep in mind, is you really need to be chewing your food thoroughly. Most people chew it very inadequately. Chewing is the first step to effective digestion. Chew your food properly, it goes through the gastric system. In the gastric system, we've got we've got acid, which is a hydrolytic acid, so it starts breaking down the food, mashes up the food into what we call a bolus, which is sent into the small intestines, and then you've got all these other enzymes, lipase, protease, and all that work to break up the food into its smaller components. The problem is the human body is very ineffective at making enough enzymes. We actually count on the bacteria within our gut to produce the enzymes for us to really effectively break down the food. And so we have to break down the food to its building block components in order to absorb it and assimilate the nutrients. And so good bacteria plays a very significant role in that happening, digesting our food. So we can eat as well as we want. If we're not breaking down and assimilating the food properly, we're not getting the benefits of it all. So it's important to remember, it's not you are what you eat, it's what you absorb.
Totally.
And bacteria is responsible for absorbing all those nutrients.
And this is where I see so many women saying, and they're frustrated, they're like, it's more expensive to eat healthy. And I think like what you just said, there's an addendum to that, is it's more expensive to eat healthy and not have the right good gut microbiome, good bacteria, i.e. probiotics in the colon to help you assist and absorb the majority as much as you can
Yep.
of that food. It's like when you meet somebody that you love, like it's a first date and you just like can't get enough of that person. It's like that's the kind of gut bugs you want in your colon when they see healthy food. It's like, I can't get enough of this healthy food, instead of it leaving the body or feeding the wrong things. And I know that when you talk about enzymes, I know I did a video on this, a video series about digestion. As we get older, our enzyme bank gets smaller. And so by the time we're like 40, we have about half or so of the amount of enzyme production that we had since we were born. And so by the time we're 40, this is when I see a lot of people saying, oh, all of a sudden I started becoming allergic to shellfish, or all of a sudden I was allergic to XYZ, or all of a sudden I started itching or swelling up. And I know that a symptom, or I guess I would say the impetus, the reason why that could be happening is because we're not breaking our foods down well, and it starts to cause, food particles that haven't been broken down flooding around through the body, and our body starts to mount an immune system response to it, and our body goes, that food is bad. And it's not that that food is inherently bad for us, it's that we're not breaking our food down well, and all of a sudden we have allergies to the foods that we might not want allergies to because we like those foods, right?
That's part of it. The second part of it is that our immune system is not being trained well enough by the good bacteria within the gut. So it's the duty of the bacteria that's coming into our body, the ones that act as true probiotics, that actually train your immune system on a daily basis to figure out what to attack and what not to attack. That sounds kind of crazy, but our immune system is designed in such a way where all the components of your immune systems, your T cells, your B cells, your macrophages, your dendritic cells, all your leukocytes, those are all sitting there ready for action. They have all the capabilities to protect your body, but they don't have any of the knowledge. And that's a very important aspect of it. They need to be tutored and taught what to attack, what not to attack, when to mount an inflammatory response, when to stop the inflammatory response, and move on to a more adaptive immunity response. All those things are governed by bacteria that act as probiotics that enter the body. They're friendly bacteria, they're not harmful, but they can stimulate, modulate, and tutor your immune system. Remember, 80% plus of all your immune tissue is in your gut. So most of the immune stuff is happening in the gut. So developing allergies to foods is basically a dysfunction of your immune system not recognizing those foods as non-harmful components.
And then you've got a lot of autoimmune conditions going on now too, right, for the same reason?
Same exact reason as your, it's the breakdown of self-recognition. So your body is supposed to recognize its own tissues as itself, and it doesn't. It's not supposed to attack itself. Just like the way your white blood cells aren't supposed to attack your red blood cells or your joints or your organs or whatever it may be. It's supposed to have this memory of which is a self tissue and which is not a self tissue. The component that creates that are the bacteria within the gut. They control your immune system's ability to recognize self versus non-self. And so dysbiosis, or lack of exposure to the right type of probiotic, will actually create immune dysfunction that leads to autoimmune allergies, asthma, psoriasis, eczema, and everything else that we see all the time.
So if somebody has an autoimmune condition, we should absolutely be taking the right kind of probiotics to support the immune system, to unconfuse our body, to not attack ourselves, our own parts.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, that's a cool little loophole we went around there too. And so the mood part. So if we could talk a little bit about mood, like the anxiety, the depression, the neurotransmitters and stuff. That if we can get into, how can probiotics help with my mood, like the anxiety and depression and stuff like that?
Here's what's fascinating about it. They figured out over the last few years that there's more serotonin, for example. Serotonin is a happy hormone in the body, right? Serotonin makes us all feel good, makes us feel elated. There's more serotonin produced in the gut than in the brain. So the gut is really the center of happiness. The thing is, serotonin production in the gut is going to be hampered or low if there's a lot of inflammation in the gut. And so that's one really important factor to it. We really have to fix the dysbiosis, reduce the inflammation in the gut so that we can get proper serotonin production, which will go to our brain and make us feel happy. That's one big part of it. And in fact, they did a study with women who have dysbiosis and women that don't, and they showed them like certain types of pictures and things, and they had them interpret their feelings based on those pictures. And what they found is that the women with the healthier gut bacteria, the lack of dysbiosis, actually had a better outlook on life than the women that didn't. So the gut bacteria can actually control how you see the world, and it completely controls your outlook on life. So whether you feel hopeful, whether you feel motivated, whether you feel the glass is half empty or half full, you know, how happy you are with the life, with the way your life is right now, all those things are actually so profoundly dictated by your gut bacteria, which is fascinating, you know. And as a microbiologist, I love every minute of it, because to me it all comes back to bacteria. And you know, and they wrote the rules on how we exist.
So true. They made us.
They've been here much longer than we have, you know, and in fact, a lot of scientists will say that we are kind of an autonomous housing development for bacteria, more so than a human. You know, they were here and they created us rather than us creating them. And we're starting to see that more and more when considering all the things that they control in your body. Yeah,
and you said something just a little bit ago about mood that just, I start to get outside of myself because I start to think that we've got like 20% of America now on antidepressants.
Yes.
And so many women are having, you know, the postpartum depression after having a baby, and I've publicly said things on the projects that I've worked on before on how antidepressants are being overused, you know, by interviewing other doctors who agree the same, and have been, you know, people don't really like it when I say those sorts of things on Facebook because they take antidepressants and they get defensive against it. It's like, well, I was a victim to this. I couldn't control it. And it's like, well, it's not anybody's fault yet. We just don't have this information is not mainstream yet. So what you're saying is that maybe even people who are taking antidepressants, it's maybe even just more of a symptom of not having enough good bacteria in their colon on board than it is a mood issue, which is inherently, I can't cope, right?
Absolutely. I mean, here's the first and foremost thing. Everybody has the capability of being happy. Right. So the way antidepressants target the system in the brain is they look at the brain as a center for mood when it's not. And in fact, there's a great book out there, I think called Grain Brain, by Dr. Perlmutter, right? And he's a neurologist. He's an MD, board certified neurologist, and he treats all the brain associated things that most people consider brain, like anxiety, depression, you know, ADHD, spectrum disorder, things like that, all the things that are associated with the brain, he treats it by treating the gut. Because the gut, in many ways, controls the brain. And so the antidepressants are SSRIs. Most people don't know what that is, but it's a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, right? So what it's doing is it's inhibiting the synaptic regions that take up serotonin, creating an artificially high levels of serotonin in your body and screwing up the serotonin metabolism portion of it. And so what happens is people start needing higher and higher and higher doses of it in order for it to become more effective. And that, in fact, that continuous artificial inhibition of serotonin reuptake receptors are creating further and further depression. It makes it harder and harder for people to feel happy. With that kind of artificial interference with the serotonin system, you'd be much better off treating your gut, reducing the inflammation, fixing dysbiosis, finding out which foods are creating sensitivities in your body, eliminating them, and you know, changing your outlook on life. And in fact, that can be far more profoundly effective than taking a small pill.
Oh, yeah, I'm so glad that you said that. I'm so glad we hit on that topic because I think people feel like they're hopeless. And once they hear this sort of thing, I've had a lot of people email me crying. They're like, I feel like I have hope for the first time in my life because they've been on these things for a long, long time. And they've had a lot of the issues that we're talking about. And so, you know, if you're on an antidepressant, we can't say get off by any means. And you'll want to work with a doctor on, you know, weaning off if you do want to work into building the gut microbiome and reversing your dysbiosis so that you've got happy biosis. What's the opposite of dysbiosis? Meaning more bad guys. What's the opposite mean? Happy biosis?
I guess, yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
Harmonious osis? So yeah, dysbiosis, when he says that, he's just referring to more bad guys than good. There's more bad guys than there are of us. So, okay, let's get into the last 3 topics that I wanted to cover and spend about 5 minutes on each. So the next 3, so that, thank you guys for listening so far. This is one of the game changers for you guys, the life changer video, so hopefully you stuck around this far. We've got skin, we've got yeast infections, and we've got happy, healthy babies and breastfeeding moms. So skin, let's talk about acne and issues that and not just acne, I mean, I guess you could say just anything related to the skin that we see that the right kind of probiotics, the ones that actually reach the colon, that's the last thing we're going to talk about is what are the best kinds, the best strains and things. So the ones that get there, what role do skin and gut health play?
Mm-hmm. And here's an interesting connection that most people can have. I always had friends in high school who would get acne who would say things like, "Oh, I can't eat chocolate because chocolate gives me acne." Right? I don't know if you had people that would say certain types give them acne, right?
Yeah.
So right there is
or herpes too. I know some people say like if I eat chocolate, I have a herpes flare up.
Yep, exactly. So right there is a indication that what's happening on your skin is based on what's going in your gut. And so treating the skin, treating the outer layer of the skin is a Band-Aid solution, because what you're trying to do is trying to affect how the skin appears on the outside layer. But really what the skin is a reflection of the health of the inside of your body, right? So the skin is the last victim of poor nutrition, inflammation, dysbiosis, all kinds of issues that are going on in the body. You start to see it in your nails, you start to see it in your hair, you see it in your skin. Hormonal changes and inflammation really causes those kind of changes. That's why you see women who are pregnant have that kind of pregnancy glow. Their hair looks great, their skin looks great. Again, those are hormonal internal changes that are reflecting on the outside surface. And so the way the gut plays a role in acne is it's an immune control of the mucosa layer that's underneath your skin, basically. And so you need to actually fix the gut mucosa in order to affect the what's happening on the skin, how effectively your immune cells target the acneous bacteria, how effectively your skin is aerated, the blood flow to the skin. All those things make a big difference. And if you just keep treating the outside, you're really going to keep getting recurrent acne coming back, or rosacea, or eczema, whatever it is you may be dealing with. Even things like wrinkles, for example, is a failure in the function of collagen and elastin. Collagen and elastin are these very important proteins that keep the tension of the skin. But when they become calcified, they start to lose the tension and they start to droop like this. And that creates a little wrinkle, drip marks and skin sagging. And so keeping the collagen and elastin from getting calcified is a very important aspect that to keep the skin looking tight and young. The way you do that is by getting enough vitamin K2, vitamin D3, and improving your calcium metabolism. Again, that comes from the gut itself. So those nutrient intakes and reducing the inflammation and improving the modulation of the gut immune system will reflect on your skin differently. In fact, in one of the clinics I work with, we do treat cystic acne all the time by treating just the gut.
Gosh, I think I mentioned this before, but I really wish I knew you when I was 16 years old when I had cystic acne. I mean, I have scarring from when I took Accutane.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's like a sentence for the... Huh?
That's what makes you crazy, too.
Oh, did you just call me crazy?
You're not anymore. I'm sure you were.
Oh, everybody has a little bit of crazy in them, right? I still am pretty crazy in my own respect, but it's crazy in the sense that I've got a high drive and motivation to bring the information to women that I wish I knew before I made all these mistakes, because everything we've talked about so far is the stuff that I've pretty much had in my past that I wish I would have known. It all came back to the gut and treating the gut. So, okay, and then also to add to that, you're talking about collagen, and as we age, we lose the ability to make the collagen, and of course we get like cellulite and things like that too. So I know that those are all things that are improved by taking the right kind of probiotics. So that would be probiotics for beauty and that topic. Now let's talk about yeast infections, because it's way too much, way too often, way too common. I'm getting text messages and calls and emails and people like emergencies, women who have had, I live in Orange County. They maybe have just had their boobs done. They had a surgery. Their body is like under a lot of stress, or, sex or stress or birth control pills, like all these things. I know antibiotic use. So we talked about this already, but let's get to the nitty gritty and just kind of get to the root of it, is yeast infections, how probiotics can help with yeast infections, and then how not just for like an acute infection, but like chronically getting rid of these things once and for all.
Yeah, and and that's a great topic. I mean, many people suffer from it. The prevalence is, of course, very high among women, not just vaginal yeast infections, but in the gut as well, in the mucosa, on other areas of the body as well. One of the mistakes with yeast infections is thinking of it as an infection. The yeast is actually a normal part of your flora, your vaginal flora, your gut flora, your mucosa, even in your eyes, yeast exists as part of your normal flora, and it's been there since birth, since the day you were born. In fact, as you pass through the birth canal, if you were of natural birth, you got inoculated with the yeast that lives in mom's birth canal all over your skin and your eyes and your nose and all that. And in fact, they are harmless part of your flora. What happens when they get overgrown is that it indicates that there's an issue somewhere else. So there's two things that keeps yeast in check in your body in general. One is your immune system, and two is your gut, your bacterial, your healthy flora, your bacterial flora. Those are the two things that are supposed to keep the yeast in check. So the moment you see an overgrowth of yeast, so you have candida infection in your gut, or you have a yeast infection in your vaginal canal, then you know that something is wrong with one of those two, if not both of those systems, right? So a yeast infection really is the symptom of something else that's happening in your body. So if you're always just going after the yeast, you're always just going after the symptom and not fixing the cause. So then let's talk about what are some of the potential causes of these things. So I mentioned immune dysfunction. So one, any changes to your immunity. So if you've been on antibiotics, for example, that'll do it. If you are on birth control, progesterone affects the way your immune system functions. Or if you're stressed and you're not sleeping enough, that affects your hormone balances, also affects your immune system. Exposure to certain types of chemicals. So if you're taking, if you're exposed to chemicals in foods or artificial sweeteners. Those affect your immune function as well.
Gluten too, right?
I'm sorry?
Gluten.
Gluten is, yes, absolutely. People who are sensitive to dairy, if you're eating a lot of dairy, it's causing a lot of inflammation, which suppresses the type of immune reaction that you need to fight the yeast, so you're creating an immune dysfunction as well. Certain types of bacteria overgrowth can actually help the yeast, which is something that people don't really understand. So if you looked at streptococcus, so fusobacteria, these are overgrown bacteria that the yeast can actually attach to, and create biofilms. So with the bacteria, they actually live in a little community with these bad bacteria, and they create biofilms that are hard to get through. And so, if you're always targeting the yeast, you might not realize that there's bad bacteria that are actually supporting the growth of the yeast. And so the other things are thyroid function. Thyroid function can affect your hormone levels and how your immune system works. Liver function, and another aspect of it is toxicity from heavy metals. So copper, mercury toxicity, or deficiency in copper can actually create yeast issues as well. So you might even have just a nutrient deficiency or a mineral deficiency that's leading to the yeast issue. And so, again, if you have a flare-up yeast issue going on, yes, you can target the yeast to bring down the levels, but it'll just come back if you don't look at the cause of it. So it's very important to look at the cause of it. Another thing that a lot of people don't realize is the use of corticosteroids can increase yeast production as well. So people might be using corticosteroids for sinus infections or asthma, things like that. Those types of things can actually increase the likelihood of fungal overgrowth. So it's important to look at the body as a whole and other systems, like how your liver is functioning, your thyroid's functioning, your hormone imbalance, your nutrient uptake, how's your immune system functioning, and then of course dysbiosis, because it's your gut commensal bacteria that is supposed to keep the yeast in check. And a true good probiotic can come in there, identify an overgrowth of yeast, and actually suppress the growth of the yeast. And that's a very important aspect of a true probiotic as well.
You were talking about the bad guys living in these microbiome communities in the gut earlier, and I was just like thinking about how we're shown in the media what bad guys are. It's like ISIS. It's like ISIS is the bad guys, you know. It's like and because of ISIS, it keeps our military and our troops. We have to exercise that so that when the bad guys come, we're ready for it. So it's like that same exact thing. Kind of the concept works on the inside. It's like, but in this case, it's called candidiasis.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and they have their little Thunderdome. I always think of it like, you know, Mad Max in the Thunderdome.
Yeah.
Because they create this little dome, which is a biofilm, and they live with this bad bacteria together. They coalesce and they say, okay, let's all create this little dome and protect ourselves, and then they create a lot of toxins. The other thing that I want to mention is, what are the symptoms associated with yeast overgrowth? Because this is an important part, because this may explain how some people feel and why they feel that way. So some of the most common symptoms of yeast overgrowth are fatigue, depression, headaches, bloating, and gas. You know, so a lot of people feel those things all the time. Very important ones that people don't realize are due to yeast. There's brain fog, memory loss, joint pain. You know, so people go, I just can't remember anything anymore. You know, or my short-term memory is gone. Your ability to multitask, and that's one thing women are phenomenal at, is multitasking and being able to multitask, and, you know, like forgetting, why did I come in here? What was I looking to get? You know, and that kind of like fatigue and brain fog, that's actually you know, yeast related, because one of the things that yeast does in the body is it produces alcohol and aldehydes. So you've got this kind of like drunkenness that without all the fun of being drunk, you know, and so it's producing all these kind of alcohols that are screwing up your brain function.
Like a permanent hangover.
Like a permanent hangover, yeah, exactly. You know, there's a yeast party going on, and they're making all this alcohol that you don't get to partake in. You just get the bad effects of it. You know, and
gosh.
So, yeah, so it's very important to think about all those.
I don't want to go to that party.
Well, the party's happening in you, you know, so you got to shut it down and kick them out.
Yeah, so I guess probiotics are kind of like the good guy cops that come in and break the party down, and so there's more happiness and biosis. I don't know, not dysbiosis, biosis. Yeah. So there's so many women too that come to me, and they're like, they've had so many yeast infections and so many UTIs. This was me when I was 23, and that's when my eyes opened. This is when I was playing pro soccer, and I was like, I am so tired of every time after I have sex, I get a urinary tract infection. Mm-hmm. Every time if I go to yoga, I get a urinary tract infection. Mm-hmm. And I mean, and UTIs and yeast infections, sometimes people confuse the two, but they're definitely different. And I was given an antibiotic to take every day. Right. And I said, for how long? And they said, for the rest of your life, as long as you're having these symptoms. And I was like, an antibiotic every day for the rest of my life? What? And it's like, that is the very thing that could be causing these yeast infections and the mood and all the issues we're talking about today. So women, I caution you, if somebody ever tells you to take an antibiotic every day for the rest of your life, this is when your eyes and your light bulb moment will happen. Your eyes start to kind of like deer in headlights. So, and that's the assault that happens when you start to lose your bad guy, you lose your good guys to all this bad guy assault. So let's move into the very last one, which is very critical, because we can prevent these issues for children of the future by feeding our gut microbiome and feeding our body the right way while we're carrying these babies. And I've got a lot of pregnant women clients or clients this week who have delivered, and they get it now because I've talked to Karan, and I've had Karan present to us before. So Karan, why is this so critical for the first 9 months that we're carrying, even before that, and then beyond that into breastfeeding territory, that we have a healthy gut microbiome and that we're giving our body the right kind of probiotics?
Yeah, and this is a fantastic question because we've learned so much about this in the last 4 years. In fact, we hardly knew anything about it before that, but because of the Human Microbiome Project and over 200 researchers that are working on this right now, we're really learning some great information on it. Here's why it's so critical, and this is why every woman that's thinking about getting pregnant or is pregnant or about to give birth to a baby or is breastfeeding right now, what they need to understand is so much of the health of the child is not transferred on your genes that you're giving the kid, that half the genes come from mom, half the genes come from dad. Those are more these congenital rare disorders and things like that. But as far as the day-to-day health of the child, their risk for diabetes, their risk for heart disease, their risk for even now they're saying the risk for ADHD and autism and things like that are passed on with the gut bacteria rather than your genes from your chromosomes. So how healthy the gut bacteria is that you're transferring to your child dictates the health and the wellness of that child in so many different ways, and not just when they're a baby, but for the rest of their lives. And moms don't typically understand that babies get all of their gut bacteria from mom, passing through the birth canal and then breastfeeding as well, and then close contact with mom and dad. And so let's talk about C-sections for a second. C-sections, and in many cases you need to have a C-section. That's for the health of the mom, for the health of the baby. If it's a breech pregnancy, they're not going to let you try to deliver it breech. They will do a C-section. So in those cases, we'll address that in a second. But any elective C-section, you're doing a lot of harm to the child because so much risk is endured by not passing through the birth canal. For example, the risk for developing autism now they're showing is almost 80% increase in a C-section baby. And the risk of 80%, that's one of the strongest correlations of anything else. People have looked at vaccines and types of foods and things like that. The strongest correlation so far is C-section. And so that's one thing to keep in mind. The risk of developing things like asthma, psoriasis, eczema, type 2 diabetes, all these things are 70–80% higher in C-section babies than in natural birth babies. So
Wow.
it's very important for the baby to pass through the birth canal. Okay, and not to freak out moms that end up having a C-section because they need to. I would encourage those moms to talk to their OBGYNs about doing a vaginal swab on the baby. That's something you have to talk to your doctor about. And some doctors may be hip to it already because of some great research coming out of New York where some OBGYNs and other physicians are doing these studies on C-section babies where they take a swab of the mother's birth canal and then they inoculate the baby around the mouth and the skin and all that with that, so kind of artificially simulating passing through the birth canal. And that seems to really help curb some of the issues that C-section babies tend to see. So that's something, if you are pregnant and there's a chance you may end up having to have a C-section, talk to your OBGYN about that. That becomes very important. The second part of it is breastfeeding, of course. Your breast milk contains 400 to 600 species of bacteria. Good bacteria, hopefully, if your gut is healthy, it'll be good bacteria that is transferring to the baby. And the largest nutrient component of your breast milk is a oligosaccharide, a fiber that the baby can't even digest for energy. And the sole reason it's there is to act as a prebiotic to feed the bacteria that you're giving your baby, so that the baby gets to establish its microflora. So it's very important to breastfeed. If your bottle-fed babies have a much higher increased risk of obesity, immune dysfunctions, allergies, asthma, than breastfed babies. And breastfeeding for at least 6 months is important. If you can go a full year, that's really where you see a lot of the benefits. But a minimum of 6 months is very important as well. And if you can minimize the formula as much as possible, that's really important because the nutrients in the formula are very artificial and not really designed for babies to be consuming. You can't imagine our ancestors' babies were eating corn and soy and things like that. They just weren't doing that at that age. So it's very important to do the breastfeeding as well. The other part of it, and so the health of your bacteria, the bacteria that you're transferring to the baby through birth and breastfeeding, is determined by your diet and the types of probiotics that you take. They dictate your health. The other thing they dictate is the health of your immune system. Because remember, your baby is counting on your immune cells for the first 6 months or so of their lives. They're not producing their own antibodies yet or leukocytes yet. They're actually depending on mom's immunity in order to fight off infections and things like that. So your immune system has to be very strong in order to transfer a healthy immune system to the baby. And so you want to make sure that you've got the right probiotic that's stimulating their immune system in the right way to transfer those cells to the baby.
Yeah, I can say this from, my mom didn't know back then, but I know my mom has an autoimmune condition. It's just been undiagnosed, and she doesn't really want to know. It's okay. But my brother and I both have autoimmune conditions, both of us. And my brother and I both have very, very similar health conditions and issues that we've suffered from. So you look at that, and you look at the bacteria of my mom and what got passed down through the womb, and I'm sure it was very similar. My brother was born without an upper lip, cleft palate, and I have my own issues. I'm crazy, so I was born crazy. My mom would actually go, "Hey, that researcher's correct."
Exactly.
So, let's talk about the final thing that is so critical, because we talked about, using the right kind of probiotics. And we literally, when you go to a health food store, there's like aisles and ceilings high of these things. And so what are the right kind of probiotics that will give us the best bang for our buck, that actually we're not creating expensive poop, because a good percentage of them that we take are making it to the colon so that our body can utilize it effectively for all the things we talked about today, for why we need them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so at the end of the day, what they've done with probiotics is they've looked at what lives in your gut, right? So you've got a predominant Lactobacillus and Bifidobacter species that live within your gut. And so the idea was, well, why don't we grow up these species in outside factories and reintroduce it to the gut every day as probiotics? And then what we're doing is reseeding the gut with good bacteria every day, and the hope is eventually the good bacteria outweigh the bad. It makes sense. It's an interesting approach, and that's what they've been doing for the last 40, 50, 60 years. The problem is with our new understanding of the gut, a new understanding of where we get our good bacteria from, we're starting to see that you can't do that. You can't reseed the gut with good bacteria. We mentioned earlier that the baby gets all its good bacteria from mom. And about 838 days after birth, so within about 2.5 years after birth, you've got all the good bacteria and bad bacteria you're ever going to have in your gut already. It's already established. You've got 100 trillion organisms in your gut. The thing is, it's about conditioning the gut so you keep the balance in favor of the good bacteria rather than the bad bacteria. So it's more about conditioning the environment so that your natural, unique good bacteria that's unique to you can grow, and the bad bacteria and fungus and viruses are suppressed. So it's not about reintroducing good bacteria every day and letting them go and live in your gut. They can't do that. The species that are found in 97% of probiotics out there in the market do not survive through the gastric system, cannot go and live in your gut. They're not designed to be there. They're outside grown strains that are not unique to you. All the strains that live in your gut are completely unique to you. One of the things they found out about the Human Microbiome Project is no two individuals have the same distribution of bacteria in the gut. Everybody's gut is totally unique to them. Nobody has the same distribution of species of bacteria within the gut, and so we can't recreate that process of reseeding the gut. So with that in mind, then what is a probiotic, and what is it doing? If we're not reseeding the gut, what are we doing? Well, nature has designed certain types of bacteria to have the unique ability to both live in the outside environment, where we gain exposure to them, and also in the inside environment, where they can live within the gut. And it's important for people to know that the outside world is a very different place than inside your gut. The outside world is something called an aerobic environment. Aerobic environment is one that's rich in oxygen. Of course, we're all aerobic organisms. We breathe oxygen. If there wasn't enough oxygen in the air, we'd all suffocate. So there's oxygen, there's UV radiation from sunlight. A lot of times it's desiccated, meaning in the dirt and things like that, it's dry. That's a very different environment, and it's virtually neutral pH. Most water sources and all are relatively neutral pH. In the gut, it's an anaerobic environment, so there's no oxygen in the gut, actually. And most people don't understand that. That's a very different environment. It's the reason why we can't live underwater, because we can't breathe the type of oxygen that's underwater. The second part is it tends to be more acidic condition. It's very moist. It's dark. There's no light in there. And then there's 100 trillion competitors that are in there that are supremely adapted to exist within this unique environment, and who are competing with the other bacteria for nutrition and space to bind and things like that. So nature has created this unique type of bacteria that has the ability to live in both the outside world and inside your gut, two very different worlds, has a unique ability to survive through the gastric system naturally without doing anything artificial to it, and then they come alive in the small intestine. And what they do in the gut is fascinating. They police the gut. So they come in, they read the bacterial environment, if you will. They can tell if there's bad bacteria that's overgrown, or your good bacteria that's overgrown, or if there's fungus and other things in there, and they can actually suppress the growth of bad bacteria by producing compounds that actually kill bad bacteria. They can also compete with bad bacteria for space and nutrition and actually kick them out of the environment. They do the same thing with fungus as well. And then the other part, which is very important, is they produce nutrients so your natural bacteria can grow up and come up in numbers. So they help you shift the balance between good and bad bacteria. The other thing they do is they digest your food. They produce a whole degree of enzymes, digestive enzymes that we talked about earlier. They directly digest many of the foods like non-soluble fibrous and soluble fibers. They produce a ton of short-chain fatty acids, colon. We talked about butyrate, acetate, propionate, those kind of things. They do that. And then they also, very importantly, modulate the immune system. They are responsible for tutoring your immune system, teaching the immune system what to attack, what not to attack, to reduce inflammation in your immune system, do all these wonderful things. Then the question is, what are these bacteria? Well,
what's like the 3%?
Yeah, so the most well-known are spore-based bacteria.
Spore-based.
Yep, spore, S-P-O-R-E. These are bacillus strains. So those are the most well-known spore-based bacteria. And the reason why being a spore is important, because when they form a spore when they're not in the body, when they're in the outside world, in the dirt, in the water, in the trees, wherever they may be, they form a spore because it's not their ideal place to grow. The moment they enter the body, when they pass through the gastric system, and being in the spore is how they survive through the acid, the moment they hit the upper GI, they come out of the spore, and they are a normal vegetative cell that performs all these wonderful probiotic functions, including increasing your natural lactobacillus bifidobacter. Now, these spore-based bacteria have been in the marketplace since the early 1950s. They are, in fact, the most widely used probiotics in the world outside of the U.S. In Europe and Latin America, they've been used as prescription drugs for the last 60 years and still are today quite a bit. In fact, in many of those countries, if you get an infection, they're just as likely to prescribe to you these spore-based bacteria than an antibiotic.
Whoa!
That's how powerful they are. They use them for upper respiratory infections, sinus infections, skin issues, dysentery, other gut infections. They're very, very powerful, very effective bacteria that are designed by nature to perform this type of probiotic function. And our ancestors, for the last couple million years of human evolution, have consumed them on a daily basis because they're found in the environment. You know, our ancestors were foragers. They were hunters and gatherers. They ate off the land, lived off the land. Every time they ate food and they dug for roots and tubers or they drank water out of the stream, they got a huge inoculum of these bacteria that developed this symbiotic relationship with us. We provide them a home. They provide us invaluable activities. Now, this is a true nature-designed probiotic that has been missing from the modern world because we've virtually eliminated this bacteria from our environment because we live in a sterile world. So putting it back in, gaining exposure to these bacteria becomes very critical for everything we talked about today.
Yeah, that's why I struggled with SIBO for a long time, small intestine bacterial overgrowth, which for people who have read my blogs and things know that that means just excessive bloating in the stomach, and I looked 3 to 4 months pregnant, and I'm like, well, I haven't had sex for a while, so how would I be pregnant? So I just looked pregnant all the time. And that's gone down since I started taking spore-based probiotics. My skin is amazing. All the things we talked about too. And I have autoimmune condition called Hashimoto's, which is very common, and that people have heard me talk about a lot too. So it's just, and I know that vitamin D deficiency and iron deficiencies, I know that spore-based probiotics I've heard help with that sort of thing too, because the bugs help to metabolize those sorts of nutrients. So I know there's a lot more that we can't cover in just an hour and however many minutes we've gone over, but that's okay. But it's such a fascinating topic, and this is something that can revolutionize our health if we just start to incorporate it into our daily lives. So of course, it's not a standalone thing. You can't just take a spore-based probiotic and expect that your whole world's going to turn upside down. You've got to do the other things with it too, which is making sure that your diet is improved. And we talked about less than 50 grams of sugar a day would be great. 25 to 50 grams of fiber a day would be awesome. A lot of leafy greens and having good levels of healthy fat. So we talked about not non-fat, and healthy protein, and hormone-free animals, and healthy carbohydrates like fruits, 2 to 3 servings a day or so. I talk about that in my Warrior Cleanse. And then getting enough rest, 10 to 6 a.m. would be great, and good exercise like Karan talked about today too. And stress management, of course, making sure you're breathing throughout the day. Go to yoga if you can. Reduce stress in your life. Remove the toxic people as much as possible. And then this would be the supplementation part of it, would be to take 1, maybe 2 of the right kind of servings of probiotics a day. And so I'll include some more information if you guys are wondering, like, where do I get these spore-based probiotics? Because they're very difficult to attain today, since the supply and demand chains have not yet made it all the way over to America, I know. So if you guys are interested in any of that stuff, you just let me know. But Karan, I'm blown away. Every time I talk to you, I'm blown away, and I learn something more and learn something new, and I get really excited. Like, I just light up, and I'm not pregnant either. That's not the reason why I'm all lit up.
You have a good glow, though, to you.
A good what?
Good glow to you.
Oh, thanks. It's the light coming through. So anything else that you wanted to add at all about this 3% that America has yet to start to incorporate into their lives?
Yeah, I want to mention, so the spore-based probiotics have been starting to be widely used among the medical community here in the U.S. The products that are spore-based are not yet available in retail stores and all that, but I work with a lot of doctors. In fact, there's hundreds of doctors that are using it right now. We have thousands of patients in the product. You just see phenomenal changes among people. I think of it more as foundational food. It's a nutrient that our body actually needs, that we've evolved to require, that we don't have anymore within our diet. So it's almost like just not eating protein ever.
Oh, yeah. Good analogy.
Yeah, all the deficiencies that you would get from never eating protein are similar to the types. Similarly, you would get deficiencies from not being exposed to these bacteria. So, it's not healthy for you. It's not good for you. It's actually necessary. And I can't stress that enough, how important these are to gain enough exposure to them. So people should really start looking into them. And some of the work that's going on with spore-based bacteria at London University and all that are phenomenal. And unfortunately in Europe and in Asia and South America, they've been enjoying the benefits of these for so long. We're hoping that in the U.S. it starts to become more well-known.
Yeah, totally. Me too. That's why I get so excited, because I see change ahead. We always say that this research that we're talking about right now won't be talked about in mainstream medical for 20 to 40 years sometimes, and that's kind of the timeline. So you guys are really hearing the forefront of all this stuff. It's hot off the press, within the last 4 years or so, and Karan's brought it to us today. So thank you so much for bringing all of this. I think the question should be for all of us, like you just said, Karan, is what have you done for your bacteria today? So it's like, you wake up in the morning, you brush your teeth. At some point in the day, you go to the gym. This should be part of everybody's daily regime, is to get spore-based probiotics into their lives, so that the weight loss, or I would say optimal weight, optimal skin, optimal mood, optimal sex life, optimal sleep, optimal babies, that's our next generation. And so we can really change that with just one thing, spore-based probiotics. And I just really love this concept. The 3%, I should say, we always say the 2% of the population, the 2%, this is like 3%. This is something actually that's bang for us.
Yeah, and one more thing I want to say, I love the No Excuses campaign. I think that's a great philosophy for how you live your life. I would say that the only excuse there is a lack of knowledge. And so if you don't know this stuff, you can't help yourself. And so what you're doing with these videos and all that are incredibly important because people need this knowledge. That's the only excuse they would have, is if they don't know it, they can't do it. And so this is incredibly important. I hope people watched most of it.
Awesome, Karan. Thank you so much for being with us today, and thank you on behalf of all the ladies that I counsel that come to me for help. I know that a lot of people are going to get a kick out of this, and I know probably a lot of them who really care about their health for the right reasons are just going to be really excited about this. And for the people who, care about being vain, which is a lot of people's step into health and taking better care of themselves, is looking more beautiful, then they're inspired to take better care of themselves for, just because they care about their body and they love themselves. And I thank you for them too. So from all of us ladies, from the bottom of our uterus and our heart, thank you so much for caring enough to bring all the ladies stuff to light with respect to gut health and probiotics today.
You're welcome, and it's my honor to be part of it. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thanks, Karan. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.